let's make this sound. Yo guys, I'm Artsea. Welcome back to another tutorial 3, and this time we're going to be making a really sick, chill, ethereal kind of organy pad in Serum. It's going to involve some movement to the sound. So this sound is really good for like chill tracks, you know, similar to some, inspired by like artists like Flume, Porter Robinson, Odessa, heaps more as well. And it's a really good pad to chuck in the background of your tracks. It adds a lot of atmosphere, which is really cool. So all you need to make this sound is a copy of Serum and a copy of Ableton. That's it. So let's jump straight in and have a look at how this sound's actually made. Let's make sure we've just got an init preset on in Serum. First thing we're gonna do is search for the mellow but unstable preset. And I like this one because it's got some nice harmonics, but it's very similar to a sine wave. So I really like it. I'm going to switch the wavetable position to about here is like a nice kind of mellow, not super sharp place, so it's a bit more smooth sounding. We're going to use some unison, switch it to 7 voices. Pro tip, always use 7 voices because if you use 6, you have 2 in the center and that can cause phase problems. So have one in the center. I'm going to switch it to about here so they're pretty tight. Have the blend about here in the beginning, but we are going to change that actually, so stick around. While we do this, let's head to the global settings before we forget, and we're going to use random. And what this is going to do is, you can see it's going to, those voices down the bottom there, they're actually moving really crazily. It's gonna make each time you play a note, it's gonna give it kind of a random place, random pitch for all those different detuned voices, which is a nice way to add some more randomness, thickness, and more interest to your sound in a very subtle way. Leave the phase, leave the random. That's all good. Make it a little bit louder. We're not using sub noise or OSB in this one, so leave them. We are gonna switch on the filter and switch it to a more steeper cutoff. But a bit down here, we're gonna switch on our keyboard track as well. Reso up a little bit just to give it a nice peak. This is going to give it that really kind of warm sound because the resonant peak will do that. And then let's play some notes. Whoop. So we can actually hear what we're making before the filter. And that gives it that really warm sound. Also give it a bit of filter variation. Drive up a bit more, just to give it some warmth and drive the signal into the filter. That's quite a nice sound. So also make sure to give it a bit of a tack, just so it doesn't click when we're playing notes. That smooth introduction into the sound. In the effects section, we're gonna wanna turn on some reverb and a filter. Reverb's gonna add quite a nice dimension and atmosphere to the sound. So we're gonna leave it on whole, turn down the size a tiny bit, just because we don't want it to sound too big for a pretty simple sound. You get more character, like, let me play it. You can lose a lot of the integrity of the sound if the size is too up, especially for pads. It depends on what you're going for, but I find that this keeps the notes more front and center. Leave it about there. Decay keep pretty much the same. It's a good length of reverb. High cut and low cut, we'll put the high cut up a little bit to make sure no notes, bassy notes kind of go through the reverb, and we'll check the high cut up just to chop off the really bright part of the reverb. Spin and spin depth we can pretty much keep the same, but just add some modulation to the reverb, which is a bit nice. And then with the filter, we're mostly just going to use this as a high pass filter just to cut off the lows. So 18's a pretty good curve for this. About 180 hertz-ish, 150 to 180, somewhere around there, 150. Reso, drive, all these, pretty much leave them as is. Cool, that's the basis of the sound. Let's make sure we bring the reverb back about here, so it's mostly dry. Cool. Now here's where the interesting part happens. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to use macro 1 down here. Macro 1 we're going to use to basically modulate everything. So the first thing, we are going to modulate the blend of the unison, which is what I was talking about earlier, up to about here. So you can see this allows the central note to blend more with the outer notes in pitch. So that's quite a nice effect. We're also going to do it to the detune just a tad, just to make it the voices move a little bit apart as we move it, like this. That's the effect so far. It's quite nice. We're also going to modulate the level a bit, just because it gets a bit louder as you turn it up. So just to make sure it counteracts that. Keep the sound consistent. You don't want any drastic changes in volume. We're also going to do it to the filter. So move the filter up a little bit, about there. But as a result, we are going to chuck the reso down to nothing, because when you get really harsh highs, nothing worse than the ear piercingness of harsh highs when you're moving a filter up. So we're just going to have a smooth transition there. Now we're going to come back to the macro in a second, but we're going to make this LFO shape here a sine wave. We're going to switch off BPM sync, so it's a free sync LFO. We're going to have it about 8.5 Hertz. What we're going to do is we're going to map it to the fine pitch to give it some really, really subtle pitch modulation. Really subtle there, which is quite nice. We're also going to map the macro to slow that down a bit as we drag it up. It just added kind of a nice effect when it's blending into this big wide sound. It's nice to slow it down. Also going to grab macro 1 and map it to the reverb, so we get some atmosphere as we drag up our reverb. Quite nice. Just in the matrix here, we're going to go to the fine pitch that the LFO is modulating. We're going to use the auxiliary source to macro 1, so that can kind of control it a bit. Yeah. That way we just control the amplitude of it a bit, as well as the rate as well. While we're in here with the filter reso, we're just going to drag down the curve a bit so the reso doesn't really cut off right towards the until right towards the end. And that's pretty much the sound there. So what I've done here in this one I prepared earlier is I have added an optional auto pan, which kind of adds a nice dynamic variation to the sound, which is pretty cool. So let me just play it here. I've also just added a bit of OTT to the effects chain, just on 11%, just to compress it and give it some nice character, really subtle. And just some EQ, cutting out the lows around 130 Hertz, just dragging down some of the low mids around 500 Hertz, just with the low shelf, dipping at about 3K and just tapering off some of the really harsh highs a tiny bit. And as you hear now, I'm automating the macro up to here so you can hear what it sounds like over time. And you can hear it with the rest of the track just to see it in context. So So yeah, it's a really cool sound. Hope you guys enjoyed making this. Make sure to download it. I'm gonna chuck it in the description, so check it out there. Hope you guys have fun producing. Make sure to subscribe if you like this video. I do more tutorials. I also have a series called Producer Journal for more shorter videos on little tips for producers, as well as other things. All my links to stuff in the comments, social media. I got a Discord server and a Facebook group as well as my Patreon. Check those out. Hope to see you guys in the next one. So have a good time until the next video, and I will see you then. Peace, guys.